I am so excited to have you on my podcast. I listened to your podcast with Papa Osler many months ago, and it was so powerful to me. I think it was actually the first podcast that I listened to from Papa Osler, and it was so inspiring to me. Like, I sent it to my husband, and it was so amazing. And I feel like I'm meeting a celebrity interviewing you because you're so just awesome and so funny.
I
And
do have fans in other states.
we've got another one here from you, Shoss. So tell me a little bit about your, childhood days with your first kind of experiences with the church. Did you have a testimony at an early age? Did you not? What that looked like, and early your church experience.
Okay, so let's start. So I was adopted when I was 7. My original parents were drug addicts, and so the Hills adopted me, and I think I was in foster care for a year, and then my dad is like Utah Mormon, like pioneer, one of the first pioneers to come across the valley with Brigham Young, and like he's on the statue, the Heritage Place, whatever it's called.
Wow,
yeah. So anyway, so we're like so Mormon, so LDS or whatever you want to use these days. So of course I started going to church immediately. I wasn't excited about it. It just seemed like another thing I had to do that had nothing to do with getting back to my mother, because my mother was present back and forth. And then when they put me in foster care, I didn't see her again after that. And so I was kind of angry already. So I'm already angry at 6. Okay. It'll be a common theme as we go through. So they started taking me to church. And so a year later, I was baptized, and I wasn't happy about that. I actually had to get a spanking to get me to be baptized, or a beating, if you will, because my childhood revolves around a lot of traumatic abuse, sexual, physical, spiritual, emotional. And so them being staunch old school Mormons and LDS, so that started, and I didn't want to get baptized. I remember that I got forced into being baptized. And so we're doing the thing. At that point, I was like, I don't know if I don't think I had a testimony. I had a little one because when I came back to the church, 30 years later, it felt like coming home. So, I'm doing the things. And of course, if you don't do them, you get in trouble. We had to go to church every Sunday. We had to go to Young Women's every Wednesday, or, as we got older, we had to go to seminary. And I actually liked seminary, but everything was done by the force of the hand. If we cut up during scripture study, we got whipped. And when I say whipped, I'm talking about like with a belt, bare butt. So there's a lot of forced, and I was very, I hate it when people say, I was very stubborn, willful, rebellious, marching to my own drum in a time where children did march to their own drum. My grandmother and my aunt lived with us, and it was children are to be seen and not heard. That was not my thing. I was constantly getting in trouble in church because I picked up quick. And so, I get bored. By the time I got to Young Women's, I was bored. I knew all the basics. And so I had a little smart mouth, and I discovered drugs, funny enough, by somebody in the church. And, so we would smoke weed out in the amphitheater, then, come in for an activity, or quite often I would come up to a youth activity drunk because I hated it.
Yeah.
Amazing. And you know what? Nobody cares. They didn't care. So it's, and my mom was really verbally abusive. She punched me. She, like it did not matter. I was a dumb idiot. I was stupid. She wished she never adopted me. These things went on. So here's the messed up thing is I'm getting sexually abused by my father, my brother, my sister. At the same time, I'm being told, hey, you've got to obey the law of chastity. Mm. What? Right. So, what kind of mind screw? Are you going to beep out if I cuss? Because I have a hard time talking and not cussing.
Beep it out. You're good.
Okay. Because if you hinder my speech, it'll be hard for me to get it out.
That's okay. No worries.
Okay. So, and I have a bad, anyway. you can't be through what I went through and not cuss.
Yep.
But so you get the point. There was lots of abuse. There was lots of conflict about, like, let's scriptures, let's have family prayer, let's sing when there's beauty all around, when there's love at home. I'm like, what love? Love? Really? Are you kidding me? So it really, really twisted my head. When I thought about getting the nerve up to say something, I couldn't, because my dad was the ward clerk, which is all the clerk positions right now used to be just one. And so my dad's office was right outside the bishop's office. My sister babysat for the bishop, my oldest sister, and she was one of the ones doing the abusing. So, so here I am. I'm like, no, nobody can help. I can't say anything. I'm this awful kid, this troublemaker, this mess, because I don't sit still. I am a smart aleck. And classic acting out when you're being abused, as we all know now, that, 9 times out of 10, the kid's got ADHD or some abuse is happening. And I apparently was screaming it, but I couldn't say it. And it's really kind of weird. And so the church got all messed up in my head, with that. But the drug use started. This cute boy, and this is funny because I'm gay. There was this cute little boy that I liked in church. His name was Wayne, and he was in my Sunday school class, and he was also in the same grade. And he introduced me to pot, weed, marijuana. But anyway, and so I did that, and it was like, oh, peace, And then and then my brother introduced me to alcohol and other drugs, and because he was a drug dealer for the school. So we're all whack at this point. So I'm getting drunk and doing speed to play basketball and, and all this, because I'm trying to try to grasp what's going on. And here's another like mind breaker for me is I'm sitting there in church now. I just started when I'm 7, so I'm not used to, having to hold still and constantly get my ass kicked constantly when I got home, because it was just too much for me. But they would teach us in primary. This is the worst thing you could do to a kid. Your earthly father and your heavenly father. Try to picture your heavenly father as your earthly father. I'm like, oh, you know how long it took me to pray? Do you have any idea how long it took me to pray? Even when I came back to church, I couldn't pray. I still can't pray very well, like on my knees and stuff, but I'll chit chat with God when I'm walking around or whatnot. But I mean, to do that to a kid when their parents, especially their fathers, is abusing them. Who, I'm surprised I didn't grow up and be agnostic or an atheist. You cannot do that to it. Your heavenly father just loves you more. Well, the way my earthly father was loving me, I didn't want to have anything to do with the heavenly father. And so I couldn't grip. So when you ask me if I had a testimony, I don't think so. But then I'm one who is just so obstinate. And so as time went on, we got into young women's, and what was happening was my mom was talking bad about me in Relief Society. This was probably my saving grace, though I didn't know it at the time. There were a couple women in Relief Society who actually asked to be teachers in young women's just so they could teach me, just so they could be in young women's with me and help me.
Wow.
And yeah, this woman saved my life. She saw whatever she saw. And then there was another lady, as Lisa used to tell me, she's like, you and your brother, you just look like you needed hugs. That's it. Along that way, and so I'm starting to settle down, and her daughter ends up being my best friend. And so I get to go over there and take a break, and they started figuring some stuff out. And I would flippantly mention it, whatever. And Glenda went toe to toe with my mom one day. She was a brave woman. Nobody went head to head with my mom. My mom was a mean, nasty, bitter woman. And she constantly wanted to punch me. My brothers and sisters were great, and I was a piece of poop, Now I'm being raised by these very strict Mormon people, and you feel me on this, right? And I get to 16 and I can recognize someone trying. So because they're trying, I try, so I'm listening in Sunday school. In young women's, and then I listen in Sunday school because that's another adult who Here's my mom bashing me and decides to go and see what is so horrible about me and my little brother, Larry. Larry just followed in my footsteps, but he wasn't brave enough to have that mouth I had. I mean, I had a mouth. That's what was so upsetting and probably began to bring on the drug abuse is I was so outspoken. I'm still outspoken, you know, and I say what I mean, spiel, and I say what I mean. And, you know, if don't come to me and ask me if you look fat in a dress, because I'm going to tell you yes if you do. I mean, you know what I mean? Like that truthful, not being able to say no or to tell somebody what was going on in my home really did damage to my psyche also. So I start praying. I start writing a journal. I'm doing all the young women stuff, you know. I start praying. I'm just like, you know, okay, are you there? I mean, really? Are you letting this happen? Like, you know, I struggled. And so one day I decided I was just like being a smart ass. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go out to the woods and I'm going to pray about the Book of Mormon. And because we had woods across the street from my house, we played in them all the time. So I think I'm funny. And so I go out in the woods and I don't know, they asked me what I was doing. I said, I'm going out in the woods. I'm going to go pray like Justice Smith. And I was being a smart ass. But I went out to the woods and I sat out there and I looked around me and I said, why not? Let's check this out. So I got on my knees and I prayed and yeah, the Book of Mormon was true. Yeah, I was like, well, damn, okay. Wow, how do you like that? So I get up out of the woods and I start to be a better person. I don't fight with my parents as much, you know, and because I used to scream at the top of the steps and I would just cuss them off. I was cussing when I was 5, but you know, and I'm sure that's because of the way I was brought up. But anyway, so I sing in the young women's things and I'm going to seminary, you know, to do the scripture chase to win. I'm actually memorizing the clues and instead of just memorizing them to find the scripture, I'm like trying to figure out why that clue goes with that scripture. I started being a little bit nicer to the people younger than me. I was really mean to, bit of a bully in church, really, but because I was just angry at the world, you know. And on top of it, I was a tomboy, so I didn't like wearing dresses. So, you know, there's just everything. The church didn't have a chance with me. You know, there's my mom dogging me, my dad acting like, everybody's like, your dad is so humble. Your dad is so gentle. Your dad is so spiritual. And I'm thinking, yeah.
I do want to ask you, we can come back to this later, but there was something recently that happened with the church, and I'm sure you saw it with the sexual abuse that happened in the church and the church's helpline. Did you see that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's great. When I did it, I was getting to that part of the story, but when I finally came out and said something, you want to get to this. We'll get to this. You want to hear this.
We can put a pin in that question, but I think that it's very fitting.
I think that's great. My case, we ended up taking my dad and mom to church court. My oldest brother, who's like, it was all, you know, the youngest kids are always like, their brothers are heroes, you know, so he's always reading his Book of Mormon. He had no idea what was going on in the house. He didn't find out till he was married and had 2 kids. And when he found out what was really going on, he was not okay. But we ended up, you know, having a church court, and my dad admitted everything, and she just kept calling me a monster and a liar, you know, but the way she abused me, she didn't abuse the other children. So it's like, I always in the back of my head, oh, she knows, you know, especially the older ones are so judgmental. And especially back then, it was just insane. It was a mind blowing, my teenage years and my younger, they were mind blowing with the contradiction. And I finally get up the nerve, and my friend Lisa, she's in Texas. So I go visit her, and I unload on her. She goes, I was wondering. And so we go tell her bishop. And her bishop is just ticked and just like, wow. Well, they swear, and I think I was 19 at the time. They swear that they're going to handle this, you know, that, because this is the second time I think I tried when I was 16 too. And it went nothing, you know, nothing, just like, I didn't even say anything. And then I tried again when I was 19 in Texas, and that bishop did, you know, went forward and I guess said something to my bishop at home. And my parents said that I was lying and making up because they took my car away from me, because they took the car away, you know. So they would say, well, if I ever said anything, it was like, and then so they never asked me. Nobody in the priesthood ever asked me. They just assumed that, you know, whatever. Okay, so finally I went to college to BYU, Idaho, because it was, you have to go to school or you have to get a job. So I was like, okay, I'll go to school. So I went to college to BYU, Idaho, or Rick's College at the time, and I met a boy. His part sucked. So he was going on a mission, and and we got engaged, whatever. And I thought, okay, he's safe. At this point, I have no idea I'm gay, no clue whatsoever. My mom, my mom told me that because they all thought I'd be the first one to get married because I was always with boys. They thought I was boy crazy. And I just loved hanging out with my brothers. I loved hanging out with dudes, It's a tomboy. And I'd had a few girlfriends, but the relationships were so intense. The friendships were so intense. I only had like one or two friends, which is actually a characteristic of BPD, which I have. You'll find out later I have, but anyway. So he felt safe. He was very righteous, and he was an okay kisser. So, I was like, yeah. But we decided to go on missions, and I put on my paperwork, and you have to go get a physical. So this is still heartbreaking to me to this day. So I go to get a physical, and they give me a girl physical. It was painful, but at the end of the thing, the doctor informed me that I wouldn't be able to have children. Now, everybody who knows me knows that all I wanted to do from the age of 11 on, I was babysitting at 11 until midnight, with newborn. I mean, like, I was the kid person of the ward. My older sister used to babysit, and they would, at the age of 11, members of the ward would start calling me to babysit. She lost her babysitting gigs, and I got them all. Like, I was crazy good with kids. It's insane, and I love children. And if you ask me, and you ask me my whole life, all I wanted to be is a mother of 6 children. I was going to do it right. I was going to break the chain. I was going to show my dumb parents how you did children. So needless to say, that is the information I was told. And so Kurt goes on his mission, and I come home. I'm in Idaho, so I come home to Georgia, and I do the interviews and everything. And at that point, keep in mind, I just got told I couldn't have any children. Growing up in the church, I used to say to them all the time, "Oh, I want the kids, but I have to have the husband." And it would upset the young women. They would get so mad. I'm like, "Well, I don't really want a husband. I just want the children." So I go for my mission interview, and in that moment, when they say, "Is there anything that you don't feel good about, whatever that's going on?" And at that moment, I take my deep breaths and I say, if anybody's going to listen to me, it's going to be right here, right now. I've got the bishop, behind that's the stake president. They're going to have to say something to him. They don't say something to him. And the stake president is actually, his son was like one of the few people I liked, and the stake president, he was a really good guy, and he ended up leading the church court later, like 5 years later. But so I tell the bishop, I've got a few things on my mind. So I tell him I was molested by my father, my entire childhood, and the beatings from my mother and everything. And do you know what he says to me?
What?
It's okay. You're forgiven. I'm forgiven. He says to me, I'm forgiven. Now, I'm like, okay, and I got it out, and I was like, that's good. And mind you, nothing happens from that interview. So I get on my mission, and I am telling you, girl, it is one knockdown after another. The fact that I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day-Saints is a freaking miracle. And then she was the one that picked me up out of the rubble. So anyway, so at this point, I'm just a mess, and I hate the church. And again, these little small little tender mercies, if you will, or people doing like just this wrinkle in time of kindness. And people don't understand how important that is, because all that crap and all that meanness and all the stuff that happened to me, and all the times I was shunned and whatnot, just as a child and a young adult. And 3 people were nice to me for 5 minutes, basically. But those 3 things made a difference. Those are the things that kept me hanging on internally, though I didn't know it, because the first time I tried to kill myself, I was 16. And then I tried to get on my mission, so my life is dotted with suicide attempts too. But he says, Sister Hill, And my back's to him. I don't have a tag on. And I feel a chill just go through my spine. And he says, can we talk? And I'm like, speechless, which is not something that happens to me very often. And he takes me into a room and he says he would like to release me, and that I've done more in 8 months than most missionaries do in their entire mission. They're going to send me home on a medical leave, and I freak out. One, because I could feel the spirit and I hadn't before, like that was crazy. And second, so relieved that someone's going to let me out of this, because President Mayor kept pushing me to, no, I'm not paying for it. The church isn't paying for it. Your father's going to pay for it. He was trying to force my dad to pay for me to go home, and I would refuse to go home. And then I discovered that I loved meth. You're in trouble when you end up with a drug of choice. Like I did alcohol. I didn't really ever like weed, but I discovered black beauties in high school, which is speed. And then there was crank, and in 2000, meth came out. Freaking love meth. I'm not even gonna lie. But anyway, I don't anymore, but I'm just like, it was just like your brain just went, you did heroin. You didn't have to think about anything, but, at some point, my brother, at some point I tried to kill myself again. I was, in my 20s, and we're together like 5 years, but I was not nice. Anyway, so I tried to kill myself. I'm in therapy, and it got to be too much. And we got to the point where you're supposed to confront your abuser, which there's different stages of therapy to heal. So we're at the confront your abuser stage, and I've gone through all the therapy, and that's the stage I'm at. And I'm like, and so I try to kill myself because I can't do it. And this is what's messed up. I love my dad so much that I would rather kill myself than bring that to the light and mess up his church membership, because the church was so important to him. It was his life. And so I just opted to kill myself instead. Well, when that happened, my girlfriend at the time calls my oldest brother and tells him, she's like, you know what? Because I wouldn't say anything to my family or whatever. And my youngest brother below me, my sister above me, she knew. And obviously the oldest sister knew because she was doing the abusing, and the middle brother knew because he was doing the abusing to me too. But all of a sudden the whole family circles around me. Erica calls Dwayne and says, hey, your sister needs help. You've got to help her. And so she tells him what's been going on. And he immediately takes it up and says, see, and here's another little twinkling, the wrinkle of time, where someone in the LDS church shows that their righteousness comes shining through in a moment when I need to see it. I'd like to just get a general conference and just say, look, kindness, reaching out to those you think don't deserve it, or those that you look down on. When you look at somebody and you snarl, or you're like, ick, or, oh, they're horrible, that's the minute when you need to reach out to them and show them some kindness. Those 5 or 6 different moments in time for me saved my life, and it saved my testimony. And so my brother Dwayne leads the pack, and as luck would have it, state president at the time, and he believes me. For the first time in my entire life, someone in a church that's in a authority position in the priesthood believes my story, believes what I have to say. It was beautiful. And again, and what's heartbreaking is that when I take my names off the books, it is that state president that brings me the paperwork. And he's looking at me, and he's so sweet, and he was so kind. But I did not want to be a member of a church that let my mom stay a faithful member, that allowed her and all the evil things that she did to me, and knowing that what my dad was doing to me and punishing me for it instead of telling him, instead of taking care of things. And this man, and they just fellowship my dad, and that's fine. That's okay, because I didn't want them to excommunicate him. In fact, I kind of did myself harm, because in the end, they asked me if I had anything else to say. And with tears in my eyes, I begged them not to excommunicate him. I said, look, he's a good man. He's got a good heart. What he did, and he admitted to doing it, so that was good. He admitted to it.
Was he reported to the police ever?
No. Back then, it wasn't something that was talked about or brought up. You couldn't report to the police.
I want to hear how you have come back to the church after all of those experiences with how, I want to hear how that.
So, well, see, I'm telling you, what I'm telling you is these little peppers, these little wrinkles of time throughout my life, and they're few and far between, but they hit at certain moments. My brother, at the most crucial, uncomfortable moment, he hadn't been married very long. He decides to go ahead. He goes through and he handles it through the church. They asked me about the police, and I was like, to me, that doesn't do any good. Now, if I was actively being abused, it was, the police, then yes. My sister-in-law, Angie, her mother was the secretary for the prophet at the time. So but she found out, so she told her mom. So it got all the way up there, and that was the beginning when things started the church started recognizing that is a possibility within the church. And one bishop who I grew up with and my sister babysat, he apologized to me later. See, there's another wrinkle in time. He comes to me and he apologizes and he's like, I didn't know what to do. I had no idea. Your parents were swearing that you were lying because they took the car away and you acted out all the time. And I didn't know. I was too young. And he apologized. His heart was broken. And I could see that. And again, another beautiful moment, and so, yes, it's all this crap in this day and time is for every 5 or 6 people that screw up, just one person that doesn't, but goes above and beyond that extra mile. And we asked me, how could I come back to the church? It's these people. And then the people that the Lord sent to me in Athens, Georgia. I mean, I was so filled with love, like I have never, and the Lord just kept coming at me. But I'll tell you that story. So I wrote my name off the church, off the books, and the girlfriend I was with, wanted me to do it. And I did it. I would seriously urge anybody that's thinking about that to think so hard about that. Because again, when you do that, any bit of protection that you had because of your membership to the church, you lose it. And right after that, I no longer had a conscience. I became a meth head, a drug addict. I hate the church, but if you talk bad about the Mormon church, you got punched. I had a girlfriend that says, like, someone was saying, they'd find out that I grew up Mormon, they'd say, oh my gosh, how many wives does your dad have? And I would just and I'd get angry. And if anybody said anything or something stupid, I lived in Georgia. So the Baptists, they hate the Mormons and they wrote books about the bad things. And they would just always, and I would just, and one girlfriend, she wouldn't let it go. And I told her and I punched her in her face. And I went, what is wrong with me? I said, I have taken my name off the books. I hate the church. I hate everybody in the church, except for my brother Dwayne, and Lisa Walton. No. And even Lisa Walton, she turned on me. When she found out I was gay, I was not allowed in her home anymore. And this is the woman that saved my life when I was 19. She's one of my wrinkles in time. It was right after that I decided to take my name off the books. And I was probably in love with her, and I didn't know it. And her husband, and then I told them I was gay, and I was going to visit them, and they told me not to come, that I had too much influence over the children. This happened 3 more times. My brothers and sisters took my nieces and nephews away from me. Too much influence. We don't want them growing up gay. How ignorant. But that was the ignorance of the LDS back then, in the 80s and 90s. I reached my rock bottom finally. Mom had died, and I started shooting up. I tried reaching out, tried to fix our relationship, for the last 10 years of her life, and I'd call, and she would answer the phone every other month. And I sent her birthday present, and she did. We had a 10-minute conversation 2 days before she died, and she talked about my sister Eileen and her grandkids. She died 2 days later. That was it. And I started shooting up, and I was, again, suicidal. I'm surprised I'm alive. I have I tried not to drive when I was high because I didn't want to kill anybody. You know what I mean? I was a very well-behaved drug addict. I had rules, but you know, and I went to get her. When I came back, my house was destroyed. You know, 4 hours later, my house was destroyed. And the girl was in Alabama, but it was her and her voice, and it was crazy. And so as I laid there on the ground, my entire life in rumbles, because the house blew up. The firemen had already come and put it out, and I was pulled up, and I was so high. I'd been up for weeks and shooting up, and you know, I was completely lost. And I laid on that ground and I cried and I screamed, and I screamed for hours. For 2-3 hours I lay there. Nobody called the police. Nobody, you know, and I lived in a little trailer, and there was like in the house, you know, there's a trailer next to me and house across the street. Now everybody in the neighborhood could hear me. I know they could, because it took a month for my voice to come back. A month. And I screamed hysterically. And as I screamed there in tears, and I thought both of my dogs were dead. Ended up being just one died, but Diesel, who had been my lifelong, and I'd gotten him like when I got off the streets. I was homeless when I got to Rome. The last time I tried to kill myself, I got saved again. I was in Georgia and my whole family turned against me, and I decided I'm just going to walk in front of this big rig. I say, no more taking pills, no more standing in front of a gun, no more driving yourself off the road, no more trying to drown yourself, nothing. You're going to step in front of this big rig, and there's no way you'll live. And as I just step off the curb, and I don't know if this person was real or not. I mean, to this day, someone touches me and says, there's a hospital behind you. Why don't you go into it? I turn around and look, and there's the hospital behind me. And I don't see anybody, but I go to the hospital, and they admit me and they put me in a crisis unit, and they end up in Rome homeless. So when I got myself from being homeless, and Diesel was my reward. I got in a house with a girlfriend, and so I got the dog. I never really had a dog before, so I got Diesel. So at this point, Diesel's like 6 or 7 years old. He's been through all these drug binges in Rome, up and down from house to house. I give somebody my food stamp card just to take care of my dog, while I ran the streets. And I think that my longest relationship, my dearest friend, is dead too. And I've lost everything. It's obvious. And I'm screaming, I'm crying, I'm hysterical. And in that moment, I begged the Lord to save me. Because I don't know what else to do, And I beg him and I say, I promise I won't ever do drugs again, but please help me. Please keep me from dying, because at that moment I knew if I got up off the ground, I would go kill myself. I was going to kill myself. I had drugs in my bra. I was going to take a big shot and just do it. And I knew that if I got off that ground, that's what I was going to do, because I had nothing to live for anymore. And I begged the Lord to save me. And I promised I wouldn't do drugs ever again. And as I'm laying there saying that, peace comes over me. And I get up and I tell my friends I need to go to the hospital, that they need to admit me into the crisis unit. They take me around here. We're high as kites, and we don't know what to do or where to go. And everybody that stayed at my house, that did my drugs, that I helped with their diapers, and I took care of their kids when they were too high to take, I had a kid room in my house with children, and I had a whole backyard full of toys and play stuff. My house is where you brought your children. If your husband was, your boyfriend was beating you up, or you were too high and your kids weren't safe, you bring them to my house, they'd be safe. Always kids for me, always kids. And even in my worst, I made sure the children were safe. And I'm in the hospital. I'm in there like 2 or 3 days. I'm in a crisis unit, and obviously I'm detoxing, and I'm out of my mind. I'm like, I barely even remember it. But there comes a call 3 days in, 3 days in, and it's from my ex-girlfriend, and she says, Diesel's alive. I couldn't even tell you what that meant to me. To me, that was the Lord giving me a reason to live. And I didn't know it at the time, but Diesel being alive is what made me come back to life. And I threw the biggest, huge fit. They had to let me out. I was like, you're going to have to call the police. I said, but you're going to need to let me out. And I was like, no, doctor. And I said, look, I'm fine. I said, I'm fine. And he asked me all the questions they have to ask somebody. And I said, and I've been in here past 72 hours, so I can release myself. And I got out of there, and I ran to get my dog. And I got my dog. And I stayed sober. I was in Rome and I stayed sober. And, nobody, they're like, how can you do it? And I ended up, had nowhere to go. All my friends had turned against me, except for my ex-girlfriend. She's let me stay. She had an RV or whatever, a camper. And so I stayed on the couch in the camper and with my dog. I slept outside with Diesel. I mean, I just laid on the ground. I've got pictures of me and Diesel laying on the ground together because I was just so happy to have Diesel back. And in that moment, while I was there, Angie called me. And I don't remember how she found out. I might have told her when I was out of my brains. But Angie says, hey, Dwayne just got a bonus check. And he said that I can use that bonus check to buy you some clothes and, and things for you. She says, so I'm going to come down there and take you shopping. And I'm like, oh, and I thought that was, so kind. She'd come to visit me a couple times and I was so whacked out. She showed up in Rome a couple of times, and when I was like really whacked out, and I think she knew that my mom's death wasn't good for me. But anyway, she did take me out to lunch one time. I was so high. She goes, "You high?" And I'm like, so high. And but she didn't judge. She didn't judge. She even bought me a pack of cigarettes and let me smoke them on her back porch, and went and let me get a cup of coffee. I couldn't get it on Sunday, but we got it on Saturday and put it in the refrigerator so I could have it on Sunday. And she's like super LDS, like, so she ends up she doesn't end up taking me shopping. She ends up taking me home to Ringgold, which is just right next to Tennessee. So what she says is, okay, so the Wizard of Oz is like my favorite. I'm obsessed, grew up obsessed. I even have collector cups in my house. I'm like, and so her twin daughters, who I hadn't seen since they were babies, were doing the play The Wizard of Oz. And she says, hey, how about if I come get you and I bring you home for the weekend? She says, I'll take you shopping here in Tennessee, in Chattanooga where all the malls are. And she says, and you can go see the girls play, but you have to go to church with us. I was so desperate for a company and safety. And my niece is doing The Wizard of Oz. And, I love children. I loved my nieces. I hadn't seen them in 15 years. And I said, bet. And she came and got me. And bless her heart, she's like, I won't buy you a pack of cigarettes, but she gave me the money to buy a cigarette, and she stopped on the way to let me smoke and everything. And I went to church and my new shorts and a hoodie. So she made me go to church. When I walked into that church, it felt like coming home. It felt like coming home. And when the first hymn started, I found myself singing it without the book in my hand, and tears cascading down my face. And I jumped out and ran outside and smoked a cigarette and walked home. But and you know what she said to me? She says, Cheryl, she goes, Elder Monson is the president prophet of the church now. And I'd always told her when I was my mission, or when I was, she's my sister-in-law. I said, when Elder Monson becomes prophet of the church, that's when I'll come back. And so she says to me that weekend, I've got two things to tell you. She goes, Thomas S. Monson is the prophet of the church. I went, and she says, and it's okay to be gay and Mormon. I'm like, you're lying, you're lying and whatever. So she takes me back. In that moment, I felt something. I felt something, but I'm still full of anger. And on top of it, I've lost everything. But I did make a commitment. And because I grew up in the church, I promised to the Lord's covenant. So I sit through people smoking meth around me, having nowhere to sleep, laying on someone's floor with roaches crawling over on it. My friend that was with me, her boyfriend's the one that blew up my house. She gets sober and then she falls off. But I'm drinking alcohol, but I'm not doing drugs. And then I do a big fat line of cocaine, looking for a place to live. I have a disability check. I was on disability. And so, but I'm not doing meth. And that's what I promised not to do, Now I'm using alcohol, but I'm not doing meth. And I'm staying in this house and they're smoking meth in the living room like I don't know it, and I go out there and that promise was strong, I was angry a little bit, but I wasn't tempted. And it was sitting there. And like that promise that I made was so strong and it stuck. And so I'm looking for a place to live. And I can't, and I find this cool place and it's in a garage. And then at the last minute, it falls through and I can't find anywhere to live And I'm like, I've got to find somewhere to live, And so I get on the computer and I'm looking for a place to live. And I put in, 25-mile radius. And actually it was a 250-mile radius, but I thought it was 25, and all of a sudden all these places pop up and they're $300 a month with including utilities. And it's $400 a month, and it's these sublets for summer. And they're in Athens, Georgia, which is like 250 miles away from Rome or whatever. It's like really far away from Rome. It's like 2 hours away. And it's 2 hours away from my family. And I thought to myself, you know what? Go do this. And never in a million years did it occur to me that this is some Jesus stuff. But so I decided that I'm going to go to Athens for 90 days. I'm going to get clean, all the way clean. I'm going to get so I can be strong, and I'm going to move away from all my friends and all my families. And I'm going to just get back to health. And then I'm going to decide what I'm going to do. I'm turning 50 at the end of the summer. I'm 50 and I've lost everything. The only thing I have is the clothes on my back and my dog. That's all I have to my name. Nothing. So I'm still not going to go to the Mormon church, but I feel God in my life. I'm okay. And I've been a member of lots of churches because I guess I love church. I like church. I was Baptist, so that's in there. And did I have a testimony? Not what I was aware of. You feel me? Because you can see it. You can see it coming. It's there. And let me tell you something. The Seventh-day Adventists, they have so much in common with the Mormon doctrine. Their stuff is deep too. I loved it until I found out they were vegetarians. But I went to the Bible study, and their preacher, he was what I liked, what I call bright and shiny. I can see people, the pure in heart. It's a gift I got after I got baptized, but I think I've kind of always been that way. But he was just so bright and shiny, their pastor, and I thought, okay, he's bright and shiny. He's legit. He's sincere. He loves God. And so I joined his Bible study, and I loved this Pastor Jeff. And then another lady, no, you speak up the drug addicts taking Bible study. That's how I got into it. Was one of my drug dealers went, start walking the diesel. We take long walks, still smoking, and I start talking to God. And we're just, I'm talking, and I feel that he's answered, and I'm just chatting to him, and trying to get some direction and trying to know what to do and where to go. And I tell him, no Mormon church. One day, so I talked to my sister Angie, and I'm asking her if she has any friends in Athens. So they know people all over the United States, but they don't know anybody in Athens. And I'm like, so I'm walking around, and I get on the bus, and I jump off, and I'm like, oh man, this isn't my, I got off too soon. And when the bus pulls away in front of me, the Institute for Georgia, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day-Saints. And I'm like, I'm just like, but the bus stop is on the other side of the street, right in front of the building. So I actually have to walk across the street, and as I'm walking across the street, I get mad and go, no, I'm not. So I actually walk all the way to the store because I refuse to go stand in front of the church building where the bus stop is. This is how bad I hate the church, and I refuse. So I walk all the way, like 5 miles to Module or wherever all the buses meet, and I'm exhausted. I sit down and try to figure out what bus I need to ride to get back home. And as I get up, I almost get ran over by 2 Mormon missionaries on bikes. And as I get on my bus, 2 separate sets of missionaries get on the bus. More Mormons, Mormon stuff again. So then I get home and I need some food. At the food pantry, the people that bring me the food or whatever is a member of the LDS church. Something like that. She's in my ward, but I don't know that at the time, and it's like a 4th LDS thing. And I call Angie and I say something to her and I go, this is crazy. And this is just crazy. And she goes, and she reminds me that it's okay to be Mormon and gay. And that hits me like a thunderbolt. I tried all these other churches, and I remember the feeling I had when I walked into her ward building. And I go, yeah, no, I don't think so, Angie. And as I'm walking Diesel and I'm frustrated and I'm nervous and I don't know what to do, and I'm there alone and Diesel's starting to act depressed. And Diesel's starting to come back to life. He was very lethargic for many months. And so we start wrestling on the grass and stuff. And so we go take a walk. And as I'm walking, And I look at the sky and I say to him, what? You want me to be Mormon again? And I kid you not, when the most soft and loud and bold, I don't know how to tell you, was this resounding yes. I heard the word yes, like the Lord himself was standing next to me. He said, yes, I do.
Wow.
And I stopped in my tracks and I said, no. I said, no. I was like, no, 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 no. And as I look, I see an old couple, and this is Georgia. And Georgia is in the summer of Georgia. And Georgia is the most humid city. Georgia is the most humid state in the United States. And it's hot and it's awful. And here's this old couple sitting on my steps. And I was brought up to respect my elders. And I'm sitting there and I'm so angry. I'm like, I can't not open the door. They're out there in the heat, you know, and they're older couple. And I open the door and I'm like, what? And I look at them and they're so sweet looking. And I said, oh, you can come in for a minute. I said, what do you want? Why are you on my doorstep? And I'm kind of intimidated because at this point I'd been doing drugs. So I had like maybe 7 teeth in my mouth, right? I'd only been off drugs for a little bit. I had been on the streets for 10 years. And I look again, and because I was brought up in the church, you know what an older couple with the name Titus as president is, who they are, and what. And I looked at them, I said, are you the mission president? And his wife, I guess the North Atlanta, Georgia mission in Lithonia? They're like, well, yes, we are. I'm like, oh, so what, you were at a Zone conference and the bishop told you to stop by, or my brother or my sister-in-law called, or like, no. And I said, so you were out, you had a meeting? No. I said, so you mean to tell me that you came all the way from the mission home, which is like 2 hours away, and just happened to drive over to this there and knock on my door? And you know what they said? They said yes.
Oh my gosh.
They said yes. I stood there stunned and angry. They said, would you please? And I didn't believe them. I said, you give me your card or whatever. I didn't believe them because I knew it was Angie. So I call Angie, and it wasn't Angie. And she's the only one that knew where I was in Athens. Like, nobody knows where I am but Angie and Dwayne. Right? And so there's like, no way. And so I said, well, I guess. And knowing the Lord had told me yes, and I'm angry. And I'm like, I guess. But it has to be women because I don't like, because, I hate the priesthood.
Yeah.
I'm hating the priesthood, and I'm gay. So, I'm hating men, and and I'm gay, but I really never really hated men. I just didn't like to date guys, whatever. I'm not that lesbian. And I tell them it has to be 2 women at least, and, so, but I'm like, but no, but I mean, they probably won't last. I probably won't even let them in the door. They must have prayed on my front porch. But anyway, so a little while later, the bishop calls and invites me to church. Obviously, they called him, There's a knock on my door. And outside are these red, and I have a picture of them in their red faces, but are the 2 red faces and 2 of the mousiest, dowdiest, frumpiest looking girls I've ever seen. Plain and frumpy. So, so no way. I had a million words I'm ever going to think they're cute, right? The Lord's not going to send me cute girls because I'd let cute girls in, and, but, just so plain and so Utah Mormon looking, right? You know what I mean? Just that little house on the prairie kind of look. And I hope, Carissa, don't get mad. You're beautiful now. I'm saying that because she'll listen to this podcast. So I don't want her to get her feelings hurt, but she knows. Anyway, so I opened it up. What do you want? And they're like, well, the Binions sent us and said that, and and they're just like trembling. They would tell you themselves that they were trembling. And I opened the door, let them in because it's their faces are flushed. They're on bikes. They were on bikes, and they weren't even in my ward. And in Georgia, the wards are like 20 miles or long. You know what I'm saying? Like 5 or 6 miles to get to me. And so I let them in. We talked for a minute, and I'm just not happy. And I let them know it's not what I want to do, but I'm doing it. Because I can't get out of my mind that yes. I can't get it out of my mind, And so I am the angriest, pissed off, and I am gay, and I got a girlfriend. I went and got me a girlfriend after he told me I had to go to church. So they're shaking, and they're just like, and they say, well, what do we need to do? I said, you need thick skin, and you better be praying. I said, you better get on your knees, and you better come back with thick skin. And I said, and I was like, and don't bring me no lessons. Don't bring me the missionary lessons. You come with the Spirit. You got to teach me by the Spirit. And I said, and I'll know. I said, so don't try and do that, And I said, and you better pray before you walk in my door. They said they were so scared. They were shaking, and they were so nervous that I didn't want to come back, and they were scared to death, And but they came back, and I let them in, and their lessons were 5 minutes long sometimes. Like they'd say something, and I would feel what they, I knew they were teaching about this, because I could feel it, like these little zings, and I would get upset, and I would go, okay, that's good. All right, you can say a prayer and go. And I'd kick them out in 5 minutes. And then there were some times when they would come and I was kind of like they challenged me to listen to a talk or whatever. And I'm like, I didn't want them to play videos, because I'm like, that's not how you teach. Don't teach me with videos, because that's lame teaching. I was like tough on them. I'm like, you come prepared and you teach, and you can't use videos. They said, okay, but will you watch this video? And so I found myself watching a video that they had asked me to watch. And so when they came back, and this is what's cool, they come back, and Carissa, Sister Taylor, told me, she's like, one time we were in the car and we were getting ready to get out, and we knew that we had prepared the wrong lesson. And so we had to pray, stop and pray, and ask the Lord what you needed to hear that day. And they came in, and what had happened is I had read ahead. Like I had listened to that talk. And so I followed the other links and read the scriptures that went with it and whatnot. And so what they had prepared was a follow-up on that video. And I had already done all that. And so they had to come back in, and they were like telling me that they were in the car, and they didn't think I'd believe them, and that they had a lesson prepared. They needed a few minutes to prepare, to figure out what. And I said, well, what are you going to do? They said, we're just going to flip through our scriptures until we know what the Lord wants us to teach you. And they're like, we don't understand though. And I started laughing. I said, because what you were about to teach me, I already read on my own. And they're like, and so it was funny, but I'm still mad. I'm still angry at them, and they finally get me at church, and I go to church, and it's Mother's Day. My least favorite day of the month.
Yep.
And I'm angry because I didn't want to be there. And it's Mother's Day, and I'm there, and I'm still smoking, and I can't leave because I got a ride, and I just pissed. And they're having a dinner thing, and I'm just angry. And there's a lady that it looks like she comes from the same world I do. It's a black lady, and she looks like she doesn't want to be there either. I'm like, ooh. So I go sit next to her, and we're talking about how the missionaries, she's meeting with the boy missionaries in our ward. I have my own set of missionaries, and we're talking and whatever, and I'm, and getting to know each other. And I hear a baby crying, and I look around, and I see a baby on the stage, unattended, maybe 5-6 months old, crying. And I look around, and nobody's paying attention to this baby, and I forget that it's been 30 years and that I look like like a drug addict and a criminal, but my instinct, I'm at church, and my inner instinct is just go get the baby and pick her up, and I do. I go looking the way I'm looking, scary as hell, mad as hell, and I go pick up this baby off the stage, and I pick her up, and I bring her back to the table with me. I put her on my lap, she stops crying. I'm just playing with her, and not even conscious how this must look to anybody else, And the mother is in the Relief Society presidency. They all see me pick up her baby. She starts to freak out, and her husband walks up, and he happens to be the gospel principles teacher, right? Which is where all the converts go for class. And he looks at her, and he looks at me, and he looks at their baby, Julia, and he says, let it be. Don't do anything. And this is, she's freaking out. She's like, this stranger just picked up my baby. She's got her. And Will says to his wife, he says, but Julia's not crying. And she's holding her. And he said the Spirit told him to just trust us. And I held the baby for a little while, and she stopped crying. And then I looked for the mom, and I saw Stephanie go over towards there. And I said, oh, is she yours? I was like, she was crying, and I didn't see anybody around. And I just picked her up, and she said, thank you. And they told me later that, that's the Will and Stephanie in my podcast, by the way.
Yep.
The one that's them, the people that changed my life. Yeah. And, so, and it just went from there. The Lord did so many things. I got a blessing from Will. I told the girls, don't ask me to be baptized. I'll be baptized when I'm ready to be baptized. And as the months progressed, and I was still angry, and I didn't want to be there, but I kept going and progressing. And one day I decided that I didn't want to drink coffee anymore. They challenged me to the word of wisdom, and I accepted it, and I said, okay. Coffee is the first thing I started when I left the church. And from coffee, I went to cigarettes. And from cigarettes, I went to alcohol. Alcohol, I went to drug. And so I thought it's a good idea. Still dating this girl. And they bring up the law of chastity next. So I'm telling the girl, and she's a Christian, about, I'm taking the lessons and this and that. And then I tell her that I probably want to be baptized. And she freaks all the way out and shows her true colors. I'm so glad I didn't. Because at this point, I'm like, back and forth. This girl was a good friend of Sherry, one of my exes. Sherry was the love of my life. And I was probably the most unlovable convert that ever stepped into the church. But I wasn't really a convert, but they all thought I was, because everybody actually thought I had been excommunicated. Oh, and that pissed me off. And that set the date back further. And I went back and forth for the last, I've only been solid for about 2 years. When I passed over the Utah state line, I decided that it would be sacrilege to smoke. Because every time I get upset or stressed out, or some emotional mess would happen, or I'd have to take another milestone, I'd freak out and relapse, not on drugs, but on coffee and cigarettes. And or every time I wanted to rebel, or every time I got mad, at the Lord because I'm gay and it was too hard. And in Athens, I wanted to kill myself. And at some point, while I was still in Rome, I fell completely apart. There was a moment when the righteousness, like an angel represented, and then the devil represented me. And in that moment, when I was in Rome and I was in the laundromat, and I had to decide, and it was the lieutenant from the gang that destroyed my house. I was hanging out with gangs in Rome. I was like GMA, what they call GMA, and I was the mom to all the gang. And it was like 3 or 4 different gangs that would come in, and they'd be safe in my house, and I'd wash their clothes and they'd rest, and I'd feed them, and I'd put them back out on the street, and they called me Gma. And this boy who had put a flag in my house that was for protection, like no one's supposed to mess with me, not any of the gangs, he walks into the laundromat, and I sensed this evil. And I had been sober 2 weeks at this point. I mean, I couldn't even figure out how to work a washing machine. And he comes in, and I'm falling apart, and I'm like, please, is there anybody in Rome that is not doing drugs that can come help me? Because I ceased to function. I was frozen. And in that moment, Stevie, who was in the hospital, and his wife was having triplets, he had gotten clean, moved to South Carolina, got married, and was having triplets. And he was a worst case scenario of any drug addict I've ever seen. He was like at the very bottom he was a mess. And he called me and says, are you okay? And in that moment, I felt spiritual warfare. And I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what any of it meant. And I was on my knees in the middle of the Family Dollar parking lot. And I had hit my knees. And Steve had broken up. He said, I'm here for you. And he was having 3 babies. He was in the hospital. His wife was in labor having babies. Oh, and he calls me. And there was no way that could have been from the Lord. There's no way that couldn't have been from the right side, of the Jesus side. And Reddy was from the devil's side. And in that moment, I knew that I was supposed to make a decision, that I had to choose right then. Was I going to be on the Lord's side, or was I going to be on the same side? Because if I went back to that side, I would never come back out. I knew that in that moment. I knew it. And on my knees in the parking lot. And Mormonism had nothing to do with it. It was just, you've got to pick it in my knees in the parking lot. And then I fell on my face. And as I cried, I said, I pick you. I picked the Lord. I picked Jesus. I was crying and nobody was around me. It was just me and the Lord and the devil and Satan. And I said, I'll pick Jesus. I picked the Lord. I picked the spiritual side. And I got up and I walked back into the laundromat and I did my laundry. There's always a moment, even when you're not in the church, even when, like I have been aware over the last 5-6 years that Satan and Jesus, the Lord, have been fighting for my soul. Yeah. It is an ongoing battle. And in that moment, I felt the strength of both. Like they both wanted me so bad and I didn't know why. And I have no idea why, I'm like, what is so big? What's the big deal? Why are they fighting? And it happened 3 more times. I met a girl.
You're fighting and flash it through your mind.
Yes, flash it through my mind just before a moment of intimacy. And again, it's like, there's what's it called? Spiritual warfare.
Yep.
Over and over again. And now I'm in Utah, it's like, I know that we from other states think that Utah's the Mormon Mecca. And, I grew up like the feeling that, my dad was from Utah and I loved my dad's family. They were like some of the best times and the easiest times of my childhood are here in Utah. We're in Utah. And of course, some of the worst memories were in Utah because of my mission. But just the minute I felt safe, the minute I crossed the border, the minute I crossed the state line, I knew I wouldn't smoke ever again. I knew I wouldn't drink again. I knew I wouldn't be drugged. And I knew I would be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day-Saints. And I needed to be a out loud member. And it wasn't about gay. It was, Yes, I'm gay. And I'm celibate 5 years running and said I'm going to quit the church. I don't go to church for a week. But then one of those idiots from Athens, my friends from Athens will call up and, okay, when last time you've been to church? Are you reading your scripture, or deciding to come to Utah? That was huge too. That was all Lord directed. And since I've been here, it was like the Lord filled me up in Athens. He gave me so much love and so many friends and so much direction. And I had to make that choice. And everybody has to make that choice, And my choice was be alone and choose the gospel, or don't be alone and don't choose the gospel. And confirmation so strong that you could feel his presence in the room when I was told, if you choose the gospel, you will be alone. I will never let you be alone, but you won't have a partner. And I chose the gospel. And in that moment, and after that moment, I never understood what tenfold meant. You hear people say in the church growing up, like, oh, he blessed you tenfold. And I thought that was just like, yeah, okay, whatever is tenfold. When I chose the gospel and the Lord told me I wouldn't be alone, tenfold. There are the people, I have too many friends. There are too many, I have to hide in my apartment sometimes. And the Lord blessed me with tenfold. There are times when I feel alone, like I can't go to church by myself one more time. I grocery shop by myself. I do this by myself. I do this by myself. But the thing is that that's my fault. He's put so many people in my life that all I got to do is say, I'm lonely. I feel lonely. And I've got a dinner invitation, or I have a friend in Provo. And like some of my friends are here in Utah that were from Georgia. There's like 5 families. They all live in Utah now, right? I'm like, it's just like the Lord has got me so hard because I chose the gospel. It's not about being gay or not. The fact that I'm alone and living this life, is my choice. It's not my choice to be gay, but it's my choice to choose the gospel. And he has not let me be alone. He said, I want to be your friend. I thought he was like this old, fat, perverted guy in the world. It's just like, I wouldn't talk to him. And he's like this really cool young guy, with a really beautiful wife. But it's okay, because you know what some of these members do? They take me out on dates. Like they used to say, okay, they'd send their wives to take me to the movies, and their wives would pay. The husband would pay for the meal and the movie. And he'd go, okay, you need to go take Cheryl out on a date. And sometimes the boys will do it too, but it was just so cute because they would have their wives take me out on a date, and I'd go, okay, I'm taking our Cheryl date. And one time, she was the Relief Society president, and this is how wonderful the members can be. You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to. I mean, like I said, I'm lonely. What I miss is going out on dates. And you know what those people did? They sent their wives to take me out on dates.
So amazing.
And they called them dates. And this lady, she was the Relief Society president, right? And she walks into Relief Society and she says, I had my first lesbian date last night. And she tells the whole Relief Society that she went out on a date. And that's what I'm talking about. That kind of boldness, that kind of support.
Yep.
And I promise you, there were 5 or 6 ladies. You could hear them visibly groan, and they wouldn't even look at me. Like, and I'm a drug addict and a criminal and a homo, and it wasn't just the gay thing. You get shunned for all those things. I'm single. I'm in every group, any spot that you have. That they get shunned by the church, by members who are snooty patooty or who aren't living the Christ, love thy neighbor, love everybody. So I was going to get shunned no matter what, Right. But the thing is that for every handful of acts in the church, the 1 or 2 or the 3, now the Lord sent me tenfold. But here in Utah, I have a handful. But the thing is that for every one of them, they make up for it.
Yep.
They make up for it. I've got Matthew. I have been so hesitant about joining the LGBT, LDS stuff, the North Star stuff. And I couldn't get anybody to go with me. And I wanted to go to the meet and greet. I was terrified because as bold and outgoing as I am, I still have all the rejection. And so I'm still scared. And my friend Matthew, straight as the day is long, goofy as heck, he's the one that goes with me. And I put it on the church website, would someone please go with me? Does anybody want to go with me? Nobody would. Matthew goes. He's so cute. He's so funny. And he goes and he supports me, and he's my best advocate. And he's so bold about it. And he will hug me in front of, like, we were on the stand together, and it was like a testimony meeting, and it was a one about music. He gets up on that stand, and he's just there, and he holds me and kisses me, and like holds me and kisses my head to the whole time until it's my turn to bear my testimony in front of the entire church. Like, I love this woman, lesbian, drug addict, whatever, and single. And his wife is sitting in the congregation with a smile on her face, just like these 2 idiots, But that's what I'm saying. You have to just go above and beyond. And people who've left the church, they might come back. Mm-hmm. We all at some point knew it was true. There's a little testimony in everybody, because we wouldn't be so pissed at the church if we didn't have a testimony, if we didn't get disappointed.
Yeah.
Those who are atheists, those who are anti-Mormon, those who are the angriest are the ones that had the testimony. And they're the ones that got hurt. And they're the ones that got offended. And it is our job as valiant Latter-day Saints. It's our job. And let me tell you, I was not a touchy-feely person, but the Lord put so much love in me. He had so many people love me, and crazy love, like love that you just doesn't even make sense. People that befriended me, I turned this rich, snooty ward into the most non-judgmental, loving people. And if there's ever another gay person that ever makes the presence in Athens Second Ward, they are going to get the heck loved out of them. And it was like one of the most least likely wards that you would think. One of those richy rich wards where everybody tends to be, and I don't mean to generalize, and I'm sorry, but it just seems to be, the people that aren't used to, like, the poor, broken drug addict. I was coming in smelling like smoke. I was cussing. I was like mean. And they loved me anyway. And they kept on and kept on and kept on. And I pushed them away and I cussed at them, and they would chase me down the street. I'll be driving away. Will chase me down the street. Come on, show. Tell me why you don't want to go to church. Pregnant women knocking on my door. Hey, children sending me messages. You better get your butt to church. Just like they would not let go. And that is so important. Without them, I wouldn't have made it back. How I came back to church, you've got to give him a chance to get his people, the ones that are the people. Because even they were surprised. One friend, she's a busy lady. She's a young women's president. She's busy. She's got kids going to college, kids coming home from. She's in everything, and she's just super busy. And I was going to therapy, and I didn't have a car, so I didn't have a ride. And then all of a sudden, for like 2 months, Barb had an open schedule every Thursday. She took me up and forth, back and forth, an hour and a half up and back, one way. And she would take me. And she's like, I don't have any idea. She's like, but I have nothing to do for like the next 3 months, And each month would come and she's like, I can still take you. And then she took me until all of a sudden somebody else was able to take me. And then somebody gave me a car,
Amazing.
I came back because the Lord wanted me to, and so that I can help others come back.
Yep.
The Lord made sure that I got all the love that I didn't get when I was younger.
Yep. That's so beautiful. Is there any last thought that you have as we're closing you just want to pass on to maybe somebody that had a bad experience in the church? What advice or counsel would you give to somebody that maybe had a similar experience and is struggling to have a relationship with the church?
If somebody comes at you and they come with you light and love, not everybody in the church is bad. In fact, there are so many good people that I'd say, let them try, give them a chance. Your brother, your sister, somebody, anybody, listen to one person and be open about your pain. Vulnerability is a strength. Me being weak, me being what I call weak, me being a baby, me being soft, all those things that I have fought my entire life not to be. Those moments of vulnerability that I allowed myself to express, even though they came in anger, is what opened the doors for those to love me. So if you're angry at the church, if you're pissed off because brother so-and-so did this or sister so-and-so did this, let me just say, when the judgment day comes, I don't want to be the one standing next to the Lord and saying, I quit you because Sister Smith hurt my feelings. That's what keeps me from getting offended. There are people that they love you. They will love you, but they can't love you if they don't know there's something wrong with you. So rage against, get mad. Your ministering sister shows up. You say, you know what? I can't stand the church because blah, 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 blah. By saying that gives her an opportunity to help you heal. You cannot be happy being this angry. The anger that we hold for the church when we're angry at the church, that doesn't feel good. So what my advice is, open your mouth and talk. Open your mouth and tell people what your particular problem is. And I don't think you have to be nice about it. I wasn't.
Yep.
I hit the bishop. I punched him. Any dude that came near me, I'm like, get away from me, and I'd slug him. Well, they took that as a love tap, and it ended up being a love tap. I mean, it ended up being that these men surrounded me with love, and they started hitting me back. I mean, it's just, you've got to open your mouth and tell people why you're mad. The Lord helps others through others, right? The Lord can't help fix you if you don't tell people what's wrong. That is the biggest rock of contention, is just being angry and only focusing on the offensive.
Yep.
I could be bitter and angry. I could be. I've got every reason to be bitter.
It has been such a blessing having Cheryl on the podcast. Cheryl is such a light, and I want to be her granddaughter. She is so amazing. But I just feel truly blessed to hear her testimony and for her to be able to share all of her experiences with us. And Cheryl, you were amazing. Thank you so much. I also want to give a shout out to Lauren Rose. She has been a tremendous help on this podcast, and I couldn't do it without her. Thank you so much for being a supporter of the Comeback Podcast and listening to our episodes. It would mean so much to us if you would like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps other people be able to find us, and we want to share this message to everyone.